The notification blinked red across Instructor Daniel Kovac's neural interface, and he felt his pulse spike before his augmented adrenal regulators kicked in to smooth it out. Class reassignment error. Student 7740, 3 Orla designate redirected to Predator Combat Training, Section 9. Daniel stood at the front of the training bay, a cavernous space lined with kinetic dampeners and gravity modulators. 47 cadets from the Predator species, Kralix hunters, Vithran shock troops, and 2 towering Margeth war forms, waited in perfect formation. Each one stood over 2 meters tall, their bodies engineered or evolved for combat across 1,000 hostile worlds. And walking through the blast doors looking impossibly small was a human girl. She couldn't have been more than 20 standard years, maybe 50 kilograms soaking wet, wearing the standard-issue gray training suit that hung loose on her narrow frame. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she carried a datapad clutched against her chest like a shield. Daniel's jaw tightened. He accessed the file as she approached. Orla Chen, human. Terra Colony designation, New Shanghai, academic track, xenobiology specialization. Combat rating 1.2, threat assessment negligible. And somehow, she'd been dropped into advanced predator combat training, a course designed for species that hunted for sport before they'd invented agriculture. Instructor Kovac, her voice was quiet, almost apologetic. I think there's been a mistake. My schedule says Xenobiology Lab 3, but... Take position with the others, Cadet Chen, Daniel said, his voice harder than he intended. He was already pulling up the administrative channel, firing off an urgent correction request. This girl would be killed in the first drill. The Kralix to her left could tear through reinforced titanium with their bare claws. Orla hesitated, then moved to the end of the formation. The Margeth beside her, a creature that massed at least 400 kilograms of armored muscle, glanced down with what Daniel's translator interpreted as bemused curiosity. The response from administration came back instantly, request denied, paperwork filed in triplicate, student remains in assigned course pending review board, estimated review time, 6-8 weeks. 6 weeks. In a course where the first week washout rate was 30%, and those were species designed for this. Daniel looked at the human girl again. She stood with her shoulders back, trying to match the parade rest of the others, but she looked like a sparrow among eagles. The galaxy had 63 recognized predator species, each one forged in the crucible of deadly evolutionary pressures. Humans weren't on that list. They were Category 7, persistent endurance specialists. Decent stamina, mediocre strength, average reflexes. Prey species that got lucky with opposable thumbs and pattern recognition. He should refuse, send her back to her lab and let administration sort it out. But something in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't crying, wasn't begging to leave. She was scared. He could see it in the slight tremor of her hands, but she was standing there anyway. First drill, Daniel announced, pushing the thought aside. Pursuit elimination. You'll be deployed in the forest simulation. Your target is a combat drone programmed with predator evasion protocols. Standard rules. First to disable the target wins. You have 30 minutes. The cadets moved toward the deployment chambers. Daniel caught Orla's arm as she passed. Listen to me, he said quietly. Stay out of sight. Let the others handle this. Just survive the drill and I'll have you transferred out by tomorrow. She nodded, but he saw something flicker across her face. Not relief, something else. The simulation began. Daniel watched from the observation deck as 48 thermal signatures dispersed into the artificial forest. The terrain was brutal, dense undergrowth, irregular elevation, visibility reduced to 20 meters. The combat drone was a sleek thing, fast and smart, programmed to evade using the tactics of a Terrelian shadowcat. The Kralix spread out in a standard hunting pattern, using their enhanced senses to track the drone's electromagnetic signature. The Vithrans moved in pairs, relying on coordinated strikes. The Margeth simply charged through the forest like living tanks, trusting their armor to absorb any counterattacks. Orla disappeared. Daniel frowned, scanning for her thermal signature. There, moving slowly, staying low, working her way toward the high ground. Smart, he thought, staying out of the way. 15 minutes in, the first Kralix made contact with the drone. The cadet lunged with impressive speed, claws extended, but the drone juked left with microsecond precision, its anti-grav unit screaming. The Kralix crashed into a tree hard enough to crack the bark. 20 minutes. A Vithran pair nearly had it cornered, but the drone slipped through a gap too small for their bulk. 2 more cadets down, eliminated by the drone's neural stunners when they got too aggressive. Daniel kept one eye on Orla's signal. She'd reached a rocky outcrop overlooking a narrow ravine. She was just sitting there, waiting. 25 minutes. The drone had eliminated 12 cadets now, and the rest were getting frustrated, making mistakes. The Margeths were too slow, the Kralix too direct, the Vithrans too reliant on patterns the drone had already learned to exploit. Then Daniel saw it. The drone's path mapped over the last 25 minutes created a pattern. Not an obvious one, it shifted based on terrain and pursuer position, but a pattern nonetheless. And that pattern was gradually spiraling inward toward a specific zone. The ravine where Orla waited. No, Daniel breathed, she couldn't have. But she had. Orla wasn't hiding. She'd been watching, calculating, predicting. While every other cadet had been trying to catch the drone with speed and strength, she'd been thinking 3 moves ahead. The drone entered the ravine at full speed, confident in the open space. Orla stepped out from behind a boulder, and Daniel saw her right arm snap forward. Something glinted in the simulated sunlight. Her datapad. She'd thrown her datapad. Not at the drone, that would have been pointless. She'd thrown it at a precise angle to strike a specific rock formation, calculating the ricochet. The datapad bounced off the rock, angled upward, and struck the drone's left anti-grav unit at exactly the moment it was adjusting for a course correction. The drone's systems went haywire. It tumbled, overcorrected, and slammed into the ravine wall. Orla was already moving, covering the distance with a sprint that wouldn't have impressed anyone on Earth but was perfectly timed. She reached the drone as it tried to reboot, pulled a stripped piece of vine from her pocket, when had she prepared that, and jammed it into the drone's sensor array with surgical precision. The drone went dark. Mission complete. Time 28:47. The simulation froze. In the observation deck, Daniel heard his own breathing in the sudden silence. The cadets rematerialized in the training bay, looking confused. The Kralix who'd been closest to the drone was chattering angrily in their clicking language. The Margeths were scanning for threats, not understanding what had happened. Orla walked back into the bay last, still carrying her now-cracked datapad. She looked up at Daniel, waiting. He descended from the observation deck slowly, his mind racing through what he'd just witnessed. Every other cadet had approached the problem with the tools they were born with: claws, speed, armor, aggression. Orla had used her brain. She'd done what humans had always done, throughout their short, improbable history. She'd watched, she'd learned, she'd adapted. She'd turned a weakness into irrelevance by changing the nature of the game itself. Daniel stopped in front of her. The other cadets were watching now, the bay silent except for the hum of the gravity generators. "Cadet Chen," he said, and his voice echoed in the space. "How did you know the drone would enter that ravine?" "I didn't, sir," she said quietly. "But its evasion pattern suggested a 73% probability based on terrain optimization and pursuit vectors. I calculated that the risk of being wrong was lower than the risk of trying to chase it directly." "You threw your datapad." "It was the only object with sufficient mass and structural integrity within reach, sir. I'd already run the physics calculations." A Kralix stepped forward, their translator rendering their words in flat galactic standard. The human cheated, used tools, that's not hunting. Daniel turned to the Kralliks, and something fierce rose in his chest. This isn't hunting, cadet, he said. This is war, and in war you use every advantage you have. He looked at Orla again, seeing her differently now. Humans don't have claws or armor or enhanced senses, but you know what they have. They have the ability to look at an impossible problem and solve it anyway. They're not strong or fast, but they're the most persistent, adaptable, creative problem solvers in the known galaxy. He pulled up his neural interface, and with a few swift commands, he did something he'd never done before. Cadet Chen, as of now, your combat rating is under review. You'll remain in Predator combat training pending full evaluation. He paused. And for the record, the administrative error that placed you here, I'm logging it as a prescient assignment. Welcome to Section 9. Orla's eyes widened. Sir, You have 63 predator species to teach that being dangerous isn't about how hard you can hit, Daniel said. It's about how smart you can fight. Dismissed. As the cadets filed out, Daniel pulled up Orla's file again. Under the species designation, he added a note for his own records. Human persistence predator, threat level underestimated. Outside the training bay, the galaxy went about its business, unaware that the definition of predator had just been quietly rewritten.